Well, delighted to say we can speak to the former British ambassador to Russia. That's Sir Tony Brenton. So, Tony, a very good afternoon to you. I suppose my first question is on this openness, apparently, that the White House have to President Zelensky going to these talks. We know that Russia wanted it simply to be a bilateral meeting. Is this a sign, essentially, that European pressure can still be felt inside the White House?
Well, slightly, I guess. I mean, Putin, Trump has obviously intended for some time that this eventually turn into a trilateral process. And indeed, you can't make peace about what's going on with Ukraine without having Ukraine finally there. But Putin has been pretty clear that he's not ready to meet Zelensky yet. It has to be said that Putin has moved a little bit. He's moved from saying, I'm not going to talk to this man at all, to there will come time when I'm willing to talk to him. He's also been pretty clear that this meeting in Alaska at the end of next week is not going to be the time. So my guess is that, yes, Trump is showing some openness to the things that Europeans and others are demanding, but no, Zelensky will not be there on Friday.
And talk to me about what President Putin wants to get from these talks, or why he's agreed to them. I mean, a lot of people say, well, it's a form of legitimacy, the very fact that he's going to the United States, first time he's been there in a decade. But what do you think his thought process will be in regards to these talks on Friday?
Well, you would recall that actually on Friday, last Friday, he was under the threat of instant extra US sanctions. He's appreciated that he got himself thoroughly into Trump's disfavour, in particular by the current Russian campaign of bombing civilians in Ukraine. And he obviously wants to recover Trump's favour a bit. But also, it's interesting that in order to get to this summit, Russia has made a few very small, very inadequate concessions. And those are the first concessions that Russia has made since the beginning of the war in terms of the sort of outcome it's willing to settle for. So I think he may be waking up to the fact that he has to move towards some sort of negotiated peace.
And in terms of the White House and President Trump, now we know President Trump has often talked in the past about his relationship with Vladimir Putin, in many ways in a positive way, though that's changed somewhat recently. He used the word disappointment quite a lot, hasn't he? But what preparations, what will be the process inside the White House when it comes to preparing for this summit with Vladimir Putin?
Wow. I mean, what's going on in the White House is normally pretty chaotic and mostly happens inside Trump's mind, as far as I could make out. But the people around him will be saying, OK, first of all, they're trying to bank what Putin has acknowledged, which is that there's a difference between their attitude to two of the states of provinces of Ukraine that they've claimed and the other two. I won't go into the details, but if they can bank some sort of distinction there, if they can bank Putin's shift on being eventually willing to talk to Zelensky and move towards a meeting there, that will be a bit more progress. I think probably their main aim, however, is to get a process going of proper dialogue and proper negotiation to try and nail down, eventually, an agreement and a ceasefire. I have to say, too, that I don't think on that front the Europeans are proving very helpful. And the Europeans seem to have taken to enunciating grand moral principles without thinking about what is practically negotiable. So they've said, for example, we will never recognize changing borders by force. Russia took Crimea by force. They're never going to give it back, barring a huge defeat on the battlefield. So what do you do about that? Do you adjust to the reality or do you insist on the principle?
Yeah, that's the interesting point. Sorry, Sir Tony. Sorry, carry on.
No, please.
No, I was going to say that's the interesting thing for me, and I was speaking to a former Ukrainian MP earlier, suggesting that it does not seem very clear at the moment that either side are going to win this war anytime soon. I think everyone around the world would like to see the war stop. Now, how do you do that? Political means does involve some type of compromise, and that's kind of where President Trump's head is at, not where European leaders are. But ultimately, doesn't there have to be some form of compromise? As unpalatable as it might be, particularly for the Ukrainians, if this war is to end?
I think that's absolutely right. And that's a reality that Trump has recognised. And I think actually sensible Europeans recognise as well, but they have yet to be brought to acknowledge. So the next step is to move from this summit to a concrete process where the two sides sit down together in detail and go over how much and on what they can move. I think, again, another point on which Europe is wrong is insisting on a ceasefire first. Trump thinks he's winning this war. He's not going to concede a ceasefire, which would be disadvantageous from Russia's point of view, until there is significant towards identifying what the eventual outcome may look like. But I am reasonably optimistic that this meeting will set some sort of worthwhile process in train.
Just very finally on that, Sir Tony, we talk about kind of Putin winning this war, but is he really? I mean, when you look at what's happened over the last couple of years, yes, they have taken over a chunk of Ukrainian ground, but at enormous expense, not just militarily in terms of the deaths of soldiers, but also economically too. The idea of kind of greater Russia, essentially of controlling Ukraine itself, seems, whatever happens, whatever compromise is thrashed out, if there is one, is a distant possibility. And it's clear that he is under some pressure, hence why he's agreed to this deal. In many ways, Russia hasn't really won very much over the last couple of years.
That's absolutely right. This war has been a disaster for Russia. They went in there intent on, as they said, denazifying and demilitarizing Ukraine. They're obviously not going to do that. Ukraine is going to survive as an independent, proudly democratic state, which is a very good thing. Russia is scrabbling around now to find ways of, on what is a realistic outcome, being able to take something back to demonstrate to their people that it's all been worthwhile. And that's a real worry for Putin, because if they can't demonstrate that, then his job is seriously in question. So, yeah, I mean, for Putin, in reality, it's almost certainly going to be defeat. The trick is for him to be able to conceal that.
And just very finally, I mean, as you say, these things are almost impossible to predict, particularly with that man that's on screen right now, Donald Trump. But with your kind of former diplomat's head on, having been to many of these summits in the past, what's your best thought process about what may well happen on Friday?
Well, I mean, I think Putin and Trump, what there is to say, they respect each other. Each regards the other. I'm not sure how much they like each other, but each regards the other as a serious player in a world rather devoid of them at the moment. And that's a good thing. It means that when they get into a negotiation, for Trump, it'll be like a real estate negotiation. I'm talking to someone with serious assets, which I want to engage with, and I will engage with it in a sensible, coherent way. For Putin, similar. I've met Putin several times. And he thinks about constantly, his attention is to the bottom line being what is good for Russia. So two absolute realists like that, hopefully there is prospect of them finding a way to distinguish between what is achievable and what isn't.
OK, so Tony, we really appreciate your time and your analysis here on Sky News this afternoon, live there from Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Thank you.